Nik Dow, thank you very much for joining me today, and we're going to have a quick chat around about how strict liability works in Europe.
Hoping you can explain a bit to me, because strict liability and insurance and civil liability and criminal liability and criminal law, it's all a bit confusing, really.
When we're talking about strict liability, we're talking about claiming something back that you've lost through injury or through a crash or an accident.
It's like you're talking about insurance, because we know there are actually strict liability offences in law, such as opening your car door into somebody. That's a criminal offence and it's a strict liability offence. In other words, there is no defence. But what you're talking about sounds like insurance, which is a different sort of liability.
Well, and that's exactly right. I mean, in the case of getting hit by a car dooring, the court is going to charge against the owner of that car. It's strictly done, and using the term strictly, it's done based on the fact that the person that owns the car is responsible for the car. Therefore, they have to pay any fines or anything that comes out of that, or they have to nominate whoever it was that was responsible. So, absolutely, and that's a criminal offence, and in doing so, the court's going to deal with that, and the fine's going to be issued. But there is no recovery for the person that was injured. There's no recovery for the injured party.
Insurance is about getting your money back for the damage, getting your medical expenses, loss of income. It's about recovery. So, what is strict about that? What do we talk about strict in relation to insurance?
At this point in time, we don't have any strict liability in insurance in Australia for that sort of circumstance. Via the normal insurance avenues, what we have is TAC and CTP. So we have third-party protection that's guaranteed government accredited organisation, such as in New South Wales and Queensland, we've got the guarantee through predominantly Suncorp. So there are other third-party CTP providers, but the primary one, of course, there is Suncorp. In Victoria, we have TAC. In South Australia, we have MAC, and then we have WA and the others have got their own things in place as well. But we are talking about something where there is no liability. There's zero liability requirements for this. If you're hit by a car in Victoria, you are guaranteed to be covered for your injuries via TAC at a no fault, no penalty insurance claim.
So how does it work in Europe? What's different about Europe, and is it any better than here?
Personally, I think Europe's a great system, but it's not civil and it's not legal third-party insurance. It is insurance that has a strict cover over vulnerable road users, So if a car hits a cyclist, the cyclist is covered by the car owner's insurance.
The driver? The
driver of the car. So
the car driver is insured against damage that they do to vulnerable road users, but what if the car driver isn't insured?
This is where it's better than our system. Car drivers who aren't insured will go to prison. So it's not a case of, are you insured? No. Okay, so how are you going to pay for this? It's, if you're not insured, you're going to end up with a €10,000 fine, you're going to end up in prison. And this is not just limited to Europe. This is South Africa, nearly all of Europe, parts of the UK, Canada, and parts of the US and Mexico already do this.
That helps to explain quite a lot about what I saw cycling around Joburg. Very polite motorists, much better than Melbourne.
This is the thing, they don't want to hit you because they can be insured out of driving a car.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, that's a great question. Right now in Victoria, we are paying, just go to the annual rates right now for Victoria, we are paying $510.40 for a passenger vehicle. Right?
That's TAC.
This is TAC. If you have 10 crashes in 10 years and you go to re-register your vehicle next year, you are paying $510.
So there's no claims bonus, there's no reward for good driving.
There's no reward for good driving. And if we look at how much has changed over the years, in 2013 it was only $474. Now that's a high risk, so that's the maximum you'll pay for a TAC.
And the bad drivers are paying the same amount as the good drivers.
Yep. So right now there's absolutely no benefit in being a good driver. except for your personal insurance that is done based on where you live, who you are, and if you've had a crash or two, your premium may go up a little bit.
So you're talking there about insuring your car against damage.
The car, that's exactly right. So there's absolutely zero benefit in being a good driver. You're still punished. You're still bundled with the bad drivers through the third party insurance.
As far as what you do to other road users, in terms of your property, the insurance companies seem to care about how well you drive, but not in terms of injuring other people.
Exactly. So other people are not high on the priority list, and that's covered by the third party insurance companies. Suncorp, TAC, MAC, etc.
Now, I think in Europe, from memory, there's actually an EU directive that requires insurers to include coverage of vulnerable road users as part of any policy that they issue to a car driver.
And that is your strict liability insurance that we keep on hearing about all the time, strict liability, strict liability. That is the cover that is used in order to pay out if you hit a vulnerable road user. Now this is TAC, but it's a different format. It's what we used to have in Victoria before TAC came along. So if you hit someone and they are a vulnerable road user, a walker or a bike rider, they're covered through your insurance. If you're a bad driver, if you have a crash, your premium will go up. There's no ifs, buts, maybes. Your premium will go up. If you have another crash, your premium will go up again. And from what I've heard, by the time you've had your third crash, you're insured out of driving a car.
Your insurance premium becomes so expensive you can't afford to insure yourself, and therefore you can't drive a car. And that's because of the commercial realities of the insurance company that are protecting themselves against big payouts. It's just user pays, it's market determined rates, and it's just it's just sensible.
Third-party insurance, such as TAC, is totally about protecting the driver. It's totally about ensuring that drivers stay on the road and the TAC continue to get their slice of cash every year when the registration fee's paid. What most people don't realise is that registration itself is only $270. The rest is TAC.
And registration is an administrative charge, and it does not cover anything. It doesn't cover insurance, it doesn't cover medical costs, it doesn't cover the damage that cars do, it doesn't cover the use of the road, it doesn't cover building roads. It's an administrative fee. And in fact, at one stage in Victoria, it was removed and it was brought back in by the Kennett government.
Registration itself pays for registration. And this is where strict liability would actually benefit Australia, because we would get rid of the bad drivers. I just had a phone call from someone who turned around and said to me, well, this whole scenario means that there's going to be people on the roads now that are not insured. How does Europe deal with that? Well, people in Europe, for example, and you mentioned Johannesburg, which is a very good example, they don't think like we do. They simply go, if I'm not allowed to drive, I won't drive.
Because they don't want to go to jail.
They don't want to go to jail, and they don't believe it's a pure right. So we've got a mindset here that turns around and says, I can pay to drive, I'm allowed to drive, I don't care whether I've got a license or not. That's something that we've got to change, and I think that can be changed through insurance as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's interesting that governments want to talk about market forces and leaving it to the market, but when it comes to the sacred right to drive your car, somehow the market isn't good enough and disappears. So can we have a competitive market for insurance for cars in Australia? I mean, the TAC and the other states, they're government monopolies. Why is the government running a monopoly in insurance when they're insurance companies wanting business? From
the research I've done, what I've found is that the TAC is a self-perpetuating problem. The TAC needs more money in order to supply the benefits it provides to those that have already been injured. We would love for the insurance companies to get together and lobby to remove the CTP that we have across Australia and actually have drivers coming back to them to insure the driver as well as the car.
Cool.
Thanks very much, Nick.
Pleasure.